thanks to our organizers and to our hosts here. It's good to be here in Barcelona for the first time. And I would like to draw your attention to what is happening right now in Europe and drawing a little bit of a bigger picture because of all. First of all, extremism versus rationality, or progress versus stagnation. The title that we used for this session is something where we could, as speakers, seek how we could tie into what is happening in Brussels and elaborate a little bit with you. Because it's not only about the spending that is happening in Brussels, but it's about the regulation that we face in Brussels. It's about how our enterprises eventually will survive. I have a couple of presentations and they will be on our website of the Free Market Roadshow that you can download, because I do not want to go with you through all the numbers of regulation that just emerge per month. And they are either hidden as memoranda or as directives, but in the end, it's destroying our competitiveness and it's destroying European businesses. And by that, it's destroying the labor market as well. So these are the things that I would like to discuss with you. And then, of course, there are a couple of things that have happened in the past, like the banking union, which is, the final or the logic consequence of those who want a strong Brussels. After having set up the EFSF and the ESM, we now have the SSM, the stability mechanism, actually for the banks, and the new regulation for banks with a body of 800 people. They had to, by the way, they just had to move out of the ECB building because it was too small for them. So again, thanks, the European taxpayer will end up paying for that. So what are we facing now? I mean, as economists and as Austrian economists, we definitely cannot predict the future and do not want this. But we should have a look at what are the facts and figures. Jose already touched on the graying population, on the problem that we have with our pension funds, with our pension system in Europe. So this is one issue. The second issue is definitely the health care that Carrie has discussed already. And then there are a couple of other issues that we should have a look at. And they all have their roots in the sovereign debt crisis, which is actually the big bomb that we are facing in Europe. Our nation states have way too long spent way too much of its taxpayers' money. They have not been able to finance their spending via their income, via their revenues, as every other, or as a business person or as an enterprise would do. Simply, we have lived on the next generation. And since there are many young people here in this room, I would really want to focus on this issue, and I would like to set you thinking. And by the way, who of you will go to the European elections? Who will go and vote? Only 1, 2, 3? Okay, so hopefully most of them. I mean, I don't care what you vote for, but you should be aware that we have this Lisbon process, and it is very important that you become involved. So what we have seen is these two sides of Europe. We have, on the one hand, we have those Eurosceptic parties, and on the other side, of course, we have parties that have Europe by all means. And why I say Europe by all means, these are mostly those people who want a big Brussels and who also want this parts of regulation, who want these things that I've already pointed out to. Merkel actually, as a politician, did a very wise thing, strategically tremendously wise. She tied the future of the European Union, or the fate of the European Union, with the survival of the euro. I mean, as a politician, she did a wise move. But for the European taxpayer, this has tremendous consequences. I mean, we did not let countries go bust. We bailed them out, and we tried it in various ways, and instead of doing hard and structural reforms, because of what some people call austerity, is not austerity, is definitely not what a serious business person or a serious individual would call austerity. we have simply prolonged the problems way too long, and this is definitely the next bubble that will burst. So what we must not forget is that the EU is a tool. The European Union is a tool. It is a means, but it's not a country. And it is an intellectual problem once a continent is taken for one big federal state. And we are not a federal Europe. So these intellectual issues are something that especially the next generation should consider and should go for. So we have been operating with illusions for a very, very long time. Politicians thought that the euro triggers the reforms. Has it triggered reforms? No. Politicians think that welfare state works in the graying society. Does it? No. So it's simple mathematics, actually. If we look at the spending rate in each nation state, more than 30% in average goes to social security. But this is just average. If we look at the German figures, and Germany should be different, they are right now by 48%. Countries like Austria, 42%. Greece is higher. There are countries who are lower, luckily, because they did their structural reforms that were pointed out in the last panel. But eventually, those things have not, are too little. Drastic, radical reforms is what we need to go for and what we aim at. Politicians also thought or act as if government bonds are safe. And actually, since the Greek crisis, they should know they are not. And on the one hand, our new head of the single supervisory system mechanism, the French lady, said, eventually government bonds are not safe, and that banks should consider to buy them. And this is actually a good thing that at least finally somebody thought about this and made this. Brought it to the public stage and to the discussion. So the stress tests for the banks will start in June, and banks eventually have already started to cleaning up their balance sheets. But in June, we will finally know what is in those balance sheets. And again, if we compare enterprises, businesses, with institutions that are too big to fail, there's a two-tier system. This is, again, something that does not work. I would like to close by, however, a couple positive remarks, because there is a way that we can reform Europe. And you will find a detailed list of 11 pledges on the website. Because what we want to achieve is an accountable, cost-effective European Parliament, which can be done if we have a look at the MEP salaries, expenses, and their voting records, if they are made public. First thing. Second thing, that the European Parliament already should have a single seat. Why should we pay 100 million euros per year for this traveling circus? I mean, it's simply the fact that the nation states should determine that. And all these changes that I'm referring to can be done, by the way, without changing the treaties. So it's pure will. It's something that individuals, brave politicians can do if they really have the future of Europe in their mind. So what is also very important is to have a smaller commission. We all know the history. We all know that the Irish were promised a seat in the commission, in each and every commission. But this is actually irresponsible, because you can run this European Union. And we were talking with many former commissioners, and especially Bolkestein is one of those who recommended this. He said a commission of 11 commissioners would be enough to run the European Union, especially even if we have this size. So what we also need is a strong economy. And what we need, and what has not been completed, is the free trade agreements with Canada, US, Japan, and India. All these things could be done easily and should be promoted. Another thing, EU should implement the service directive and complete the single markets. The four freedoms that we have are still not existing in the way they were intended to be. In the fact, actually, we moved to this ever closer union and tried to get the political integration, the democratic integration, but the economic integration by all means. And this is my last and final point. I don't think, and this is what history has proven, when Europe had been politically fragmented, it was the most successful economic area in the world. We beat all the other areas, Asia, Latin America, Northern America, etc. When Europe was free and competitive, and its regions had been free and competitive, we created economic growth and well-being because enterprises could flourish. And this is something that we have definitely lost in the past decade. So I will keep it with that and hand over the mic.